Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about densities and dimensions. Densities and dimensions, those two words are more or less interchangeable, are a very important fundamental part of Law of One cosmology. They're a key component to the physical and metaphysical structure of the universe and explain pretty well why everything is the way it is and will be in all of our lives and on planet Earth. In many ways, looking at densities is like looking at a map of spiritual evolution in the universe, showing us both where we have been in the distant past as well as where we're headed in the distant future. So what exactly are densities and dimensions, and how can understanding them help us in our spiritual growth and our everyday lives? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook page, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week. We meet on Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time and Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. Just contact us at the email shown on your screen, seattlelawofone@gmail.com. You can get on our mailing list and receive our weekly updates on what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we have recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Trisha Bean from the L&L Research Channeling team. Just hit the subscribe button to get notifications when we upload new videos, and contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you'd ever like to join one of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, as mentioned, today's episode is about densities and dimensions. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists for today. Panelists, if you just introduce yourself by your name and where you're calling from, that would be great. Starting with Grace.
Hello, other selves. My name is Grace Rude. I'm calling from South Florida. I also have with me for this episode my cat Slinky. So good to see everyone.
Hey, Slinky. Oh, wonderful. Great to have you both here. Josh?
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh, and I'm calling from New Jersey. Very excited and happy to be here. Thank you.
So great to have you on finally, my friend. Aram?
Hi, I'm Aram, and I'm calling from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm so happy to be here.
Nice. So happy to have you all here. This is such a huge topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your perspectives on it. Just wanted to remind our viewers that none of us here are experts on the Law of One. We are normal people like you, just hanging out, having conversations about spiritual things that seem important to us. Anything we say could be wrong, and you're welcome to disagree with anything or everything that any of us say. If you are already familiar with the Law of One and the entity known as Quo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on chakras and energy centers. Otherwise, for those who are new to the Law of One, you can think of the Law of One as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. All of the reading passages that we're looking at today came to us through a process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, inner planes entities, etc. A channel basically serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through. And in this case, those other entities appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are two types of channeling that have been used by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, meaning they're subconscious or unconscious as if asleep, meaning they really are not aware at all of the words that are coming out of their mouth. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra back in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but deep meditative state, meaning they are only somewhat aware of the words that are coming out of their mouths. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Quo, starting in the mid-1980s all the way up to present day. Who is Quo? You can think of Quo as a group entity made up of 3 social memory complexes, Ra at 6th density, Latui at 5th density, and Hatan at 4th density. You can think of the social memory complex as a planetary consciousness, as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one group mind. What are densities? You can think of densities as different levels of consciousness or of reality. This whole episode is about densities, so let's just leave it at that. And for now, suffice it to say that Quo would appear to be an extraterrestrial entity made up of 3 different planetary consciousnesses at 3 different densities. As mentioned, first contact with the entity known as Quo was made in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the Ra contact in 1984. And they have been channeled every month since then up to the present day by the L&L team. Transcripts can be found in the L&L Conscious Channeling Library. Before we get into our first passages on densities, it would help to understand what energy centers are. You're going to be hearing many references to red ray, orange ray, yellow ray, etc. These are called energy centers in the Law of One. Energy centers are not exactly the same thing as chakras as taught in the Hindu tradition, but I think it's fair to say most Hindus would agree that they are comparable. And there's a fair bit of correlation between densities and energy centers, particularly with regard to their colors. First density is associated with red ray, second density associated with orange ray, third density associated with yellow ray, etc. So you could say that prana or chi or life force, akin to the Force and the Star Wars movies, flows upwards through our chakras or our energy centers, much in the same way that intelligent energy, as it is referred to in the Law of One, flows upward through the densities, starting with first density. So red ray or root chakra is associated with survival, sexual reproduction, fundamental vitality. Orange ray or sacral chakra deals with our personal identity, relationships of self to others. Yellow ray or solar plexus chakra refers to our identity in groups, our relationships with groups of others as opposed to individuals. Green ray or heart chakra deals with universal, unconditional love, and it's the springboard to higher chakras and intelligent infinity. Blue ray or throat chakra is associated with wisdom, light, honesty, clarity, and inspiration. Indigo ray or third eye chakra is known as the gateway to intelligent infinity. It's the center of the adept, of magical workings, and what in the Law of One is called work in consciousness. Violet ray or crown chakra is our vibratory essence. It's the sum total of all of our energy centers, our energetic signature, our overall balance. And that would be chakras in a nutshell. Panelists, is there anything important I missed? Anything you want to add before we start getting into densities, which, as you can see, correlate in colors the same way that we saw in our chakras? Panelists, anything I missed? Anything you want to add? Sounds good. So let us start with first density. In session 41, question 10 of the Ra contact, the questioner asked, when first density is formed, we have fire, air, earth, and water. There is at some time the first movement or individuation of life into a portion of consciousness that is self-mobile. Could you describe the process of the creation of this and what type of energy center that it has? Ra says, I am Ra. The first, or red ray density, though attracted towards growth, is not in the proper vibration for those conditions conducive to what you may call the spark of awareness. As the vibratory energies move from red to orange, the vibratory environment is such as to stimulate those chemical substances which lately had been inert to combine in such a fashion that love and light begin the function of growth. The supposition which you had earlier made concerning single-celled entities, such as the polymorphous dinoflagellate, is correct. The mechanism is one of the attraction of upward spiraling light. There is nothing random about this or any portion of evolution. I find that so fascinating since I am, as maybe our viewers might know, a retired high school biology teacher. So really the core of Darwinian evolution is that it is basically a random process. There's no particular end result, no particular goal in mind. And this is pretty much saying the opposite of that, that there's nothing random about this or any portion of evolution. Starting at first density with the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, you have inanimate matter, what we would call, that has the very basic beginning primitive forms of consciousness to be developed in later densities, which of course we're going to get into later. Grace, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I love that you brought up Darwin. I think Darwin can really be credited to bringing this idea of evolution to the forefront of science. But like you said, he really missed a huge part of the idea of evolution and that it's not random. And that was his whole theory, like you stated. Um, and I think that it overlooks this aspect that, can be attributed to us not considering the spiritual or etheric essence behind everything that is physical. And once you have that understanding, you're then able to understand this idea of evolution through the densities a little bit easier. Um, I wanted to say, when I think about densities, each octave of experience, it's a completely different experience. So here in the first density, we have this elemental kingdom, and it can't have that spark of life yet. It's not in the right configuration. So there's a huge jump to get to that second density. And I thought that was interesting.
It is fascinating to be sure. And I wouldn't expect scientists to get into any of this stuff. I think science is inherently, by nature, limited to the things that we can perceive with our senses. And metaphysics, by definition, refers to those aspects of the universe which we can't necessarily see. So I guess maybe just forms a nice complement maybe to Darwin's theories or scientific theories. Appreciate your sharing. Josh, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, that was a really interesting passage there. It's on the first density, it's kind of far from where we are as human beings to imagine what it's like to be in first density. But on the topic of Darwin and science, something that came to mind is the Big Bang, and how in physics or science, I think, they say the first thing in the beginning of the universe was the Big Bang, and this massive explosion from a infinitesimal point came out everything, right? All the stars and planets and matter. And first density, as you read, is the fire, air, earth, water, also called elements, right? And so it's interesting how that could come from this just chaotic, supposedly random explosion of matter into intelligent life. And I find it one thing that I think is helpful to understand how this could possibly happen. In the raw contact, Ross says that in the first density, the mineral and water life upon the planet are learning from fire and wind the awareness of being in first density. And when I read that, I kind of was able to understand, okay, fire we know is burning, has energy, it's dynamic. Wind is moving, there's motion, there's dynamic. But if you just had water by itself and earth by itself, it's more stagnant, not too much going on. And so I could see how those two more active elements acting on the two more static elements can begin a process of growth or movement, which ultimately is awareness, is what they're working toward. So that came to mind.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And it reminds me of what they described as the upward spiraling of light, which kind of reminds us of Kundalini, which would be an upward spiraling movement of energy through the energy centers. And I did want to add to what you said, and noting that we've used this density diagram in pretty much every episode of this podcast. And it always strikes me as interesting that we are beginning with the idea that elements like earth, air, fire, and water do in fact have some level of consciousness, which is not something we normally think about in a normal Western civilized way of scientific thinking. But I mean, I suppose if you compare a planet like Earth that has earth, air, fire, and water to, say, a planet that does not have any form of water, any form of atmosphere, or any type of air, then I guess you could say then, yeah, sure, there's a big difference between a planet that has those elements and seems more conducive towards the evolution of life on from there. Not to mention many indigenous peoples who would very much appear to be able to communicate with elements like fire and water and earth and air. Something worth noting, I would say. Aram, any thoughts, reflections to add?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, and I'm not a scientist. I have just a layman's understanding of most science. So if you could fill in the gaps for me, Jonathan, that would be great. But the thought that comes to mind is that, when we're studying all these spiritual concepts, there's this idea of different planes. So there's like an inner plane and an outer plane. I think of the outer plane as more of a spiritual realm, and the inner plane is more where you have physicality or matter. And so I think of when they say that everything has consciousness, I feel like there's just this field of consciousness, and the physical different levels of densities have the ability to be aware of different levels or densities of consciousness, if that makes sense.
I think so, but that's something we could spend hours pondering and contemplating and discussing for sure, because that's beyond my understanding as well. I think my understanding of outer planes and inner planes is that outer planes refers to like the physical universe we can see, and inner planes refers to the metaphysical universe that we cannot see. That's my understanding of it. I could be wrong, but insofar
Oh,
as
I
that
think
has any bearing on what you said.
Do I have it flipped then?
I think you said it the other way around, but you were kind of putting it in a different context that I'm not sure about. And like I said, I could be wrong on that too. That's just my take on it. Grace, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I love what Aram said about the different levels of awareness or consciousness at each density. Did I get that right, Aram? Is that the heart of what you were saying? Yeah. Jonathan, would you go back to the previous slide for just a second? Um, like when you said that, I love that you actually panned back to this tab, Jonathan, because I think it kind of goes back to this idea of each density being that different octave of experience. And I just wanted to share like an analogy that's really helped me understand the densities is that each density is a specific color, as we can see here. But Ross states that dimensions are infinite. And so I imagine the dimensions within each density being different hues of each color, if that makes sense. And so I think that as you evolve to each new color, you're able to perceive more or different experience.
What a fascinating way to look at that. I never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have anything else they wanted to share before we look at second density? We are actually going to look at passages related to all 7 densities, and we're going to try to do this at less than 2 hours. So viewers, wish us luck on this. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to add before we look at second density?
I did want to add one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was what you and Grace were discussing earlier about Darwin and evolution. And in this density, there's always kind of like more of this black and white thinking of either or. And I can remember debates about the difference between like evolution and creation. And when I came across the raw material, I was like, oh, it can be both. It doesn't have to be either or.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and as a high school biology teacher, I remember when there were efforts to teach intelligent design as an alternative to evolution in our classes. And all the biology teachers, of course, rejected this as something that was being used by conservative Christians to get the Christian story of creationism taught in science classes. Little did I know that the idea of intelligent design was actually going to make a whole lot more sense to me years later. But we'll save that for another episode. Let's take a look at second density. On October 20th, 2018, Quo is recorded as saying, "This simple awareness that was able to express itself began to move forward, shall we say, to be drawn forward or upward by the upward spiraling lines of light that are the intelligent energy of creation that has made all that there is, and which calls forth each portion of all that there is into higher and higher expressions of consciousness, so that within the second density, or the orange ray energy center, that which you know as movement and growth was possible, so that the lower forms of plants and animals began to have a beingness within the orange ray energy center. As they were continually drawn forward as well, or upward by the upward spiraling line of light, they began to expand the simple awareness of the first density, so that there became what you call the very beginnings of self-consciousness, of movement and growth, seeking of light." I really love the imagery here, and as we have said before, yeah, you can see a huge quantum leap from first density to second density, and comparing the consciousness of plants and lower animals to like what we would call inanimate matter. And you can see this in these upward spiraling of light as things like plants, they say, respond by growing towards the light. It's a beautiful image that, again, it paints a picture that before learning about the law of one, I had no idea that such a thing existed. And to see where it goes beyond this into the next densities is super fascinating as well. Josh, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything from this passage?
Yeah. So specifically the thing you highlighted in blue about movement and growth seeking the light, I recall Don was asking Ross some questions to better understand what that meant, and they gave the kind of an explanation which helped me understand it better of um, like a plant has the awareness and is working toward it's working on awareness to eventually get to self-awareness, but awareness of something doesn't mean like a human has awareness, like I can see you and hear you and so on, but let's just keep it simple. But saying a plant has awareness of the sun, right? That the leaves, if you put a plant in your window, it's gonna angle its leaves toward the stimulus, which is the light and heat from the sun. So putting that together helped me to see how the lower life forms that just came out of elemental existence that have organized themselves into plants are gaining awareness of their environment, of their surroundings, like a plant moves its leaves toward the sun, to get light.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of what Grace was suggesting, that at each density level, there are different grades, different shades of each color as you grow in awareness. And what you're describing, Josh, reminds me that, yeah, the beginning level, I guess you could consider that maybe to be plants. And then at the highest level, you do have animals like primates, for example, that seem to have a significant level of self-consciousness, awareness of themselves. And that is pretty much the springboard into the next density of third consciousness, I believe. Aram, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, I guess what it's describing is just the evolution of biology, basically, life creating more life and evolving to I guess the next stage. And like for us, we have a brain and consciousness and the ability to make choices and decisions, but I'm guessing that lower life forms, they might not necessarily have a brain, but they have receptors. And so, that is what is responding to the stimulus and I guess their own form of free will.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Grace, anything to add?
Yeah, I love what you guys said. I think that as we progress through the densities, you're like a plant, for instance, like you guys were saying, it has a specific set of sensory organs that are there. And I think as you move forward up towards the reaching light, you're able to develop more senses of perception to perceive bigger realities. I think it was hard for me at first to wrap my head around animals and vegetables being in the same density. To me, that was a big jump at first, but I think that the more that I've studied the material, I can definitely see in nature, like Josh was saying, you put a plant, out on your windowsill and it's reaching towards the sun. It's like such a small thing that we can observe that we totally don't even think of on a day-to-day basis. But that is, I mean, that's the key, right? That we're always spiraling and reaching towards something, the sun, spirit. And it was just a really beautiful revelation.
It is a beautiful revelation for sure. And, I mean, it goes back to single celled bacteria and dinoflagellates, I believe that they referred to before. So, yeah, looking at it from, a biological perspective of evolution, it's a really beautiful way to affirm what we've seen already, this progression from very, very simple forms to more complex forms with more capacity for thought and reasoning and consciousness and all that stuff. Third density is where it gets a lot more interesting. Anybody have anything they wanted to share before we get into third density?
Yeah, I don't know if this is getting too far ahead. If so, let me know and I'll hold off. But I wanted to mention about pets and how second densities, uh, most common. Ra talks about how a second density entity makes the transition to third density, which is going from awareness to self-awareness. Like we are self-aware. I know I'm Josh, but in the wild, you can imagine you have a pack, a herd of sheep or something, and they just think they don't necessarily have self-awareness the way a human does. And Ross says that the way that is most common that a second density animal makes uh, is graduated up to third density is from the love, sending and receiving of love from a or investment of love from a human, from a person. So your pet, that you give them a name, you call their name and they respond and they come. Sometimes pet cats and dogs develop, like, people notice they have a personality, and you're loving them, they express love to you. And that investment of love and spirits them by the act of them gaining a self-awareness, they then develop a spirit complex to their mind body complex. And that's the most common way that a plant or animal can become a third density human.
That's a really important point, and I appreciate your bringing it up. In order to save time, I did actually have a passage on that I cut out from the podcast. So I really appreciate your bringing it up. You don't by any chance have the date of that session or anything we could just tell viewers now if they want to look it up? You don't have that handy, do you? If you do, you can go ahead and share it. Otherwise, yeah, I think I'd like to go ahead and move ahead to third density. That's where things start getting more interesting, at least from a human perspective. Third density. On October 21st, 1990, and this passage has been edited for brevity, Quo is recorded as saying, when they, referring to second density entities, have learned the instinct of turning to the light, their graduation is at hand, and they become self-conscious sparks of the infinite one. But in this grade, and only in this grade or density, is there a brevity of the time allowed for learning, and a great veil is drawn across most of the mind. At this point, the entity is asleep to the choice that is the business of this density, the making of the choice. For you see, there are two paths to the Creator. They are both valid. We do not teach the path of negativity, often called the path of the left hand, or by us, the path which is not. It is, however, a valid path, though very difficult compared to the service to others, or positive or radiant path. This choice must be made blindly. Thus, there will never be, has never been, and is never any objective proof that is objective enough to be objective to a scientist of the possibility of anything but that which can be felt by the senses, by a living entity using the senses that limit it. It is in this darkness, by blind faith alone, that a leap is taken from the safety of sleep to the risk of being awake. Yeah, and this is where I would say we are taking a big turn from biological evolution as taught by Darwin. And we have several passages related to graduation specifically that we'll get to shortly. For now, suffice it to say, it would appear that part of the design of spiritual evolution of the universe is that when you reach third density, and this is the level of consciousness of humans and cetaceans, apparently, including animals like whales and dolphins, that when you reach third density, the spirit that was latent in second density is awakened enough to be able to see the Creator in yourself and in others. And so the whole point of existence at third density is to consciously make a choice to be of service to others, meaning thinking of others at least as much as yourself and a little bit more, or service to self, where you're thinking of only yourself 95% of the time and never think about the well-being of others more than 5% of the time. That's a big choice to make, and apparently most people are not aware of this, that there's something to be done, because the veil of forgetting is the big thing in third density. It's meant to be a closed note test. When each of us incarnate here in third density, we forget that all is one, and that one thing is love. We forget that every other person that you look at is the Creator behind a mask, and the challenge is to see if you can choose to love others more than yourself, or only yourself, in spite of, for lack of any evidence that this is in fact the case, that we forgot. Aram, any thoughts on anything from this passage?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, and I'm gonna try to be brief if I can. Um, yeah, so maybe I'll wait. I'll wait until
Yeah,
the passage. Sorry.
yeah, we can come back to you for sure. Grace?
I can't wait to hear what you say, Aram. What stuck out to me here, there's so much. When you think about third density in our experience, I'm like overwhelmed. I'm like, holy shit, there's so much to say. But I'd like to maybe just point back to this passage, and it says the choice must be made blindly. And I think of wanderers who come from other densities, and I think about the archetype of the fool and taking that step and that leap of faith. And yeah, I love the visual. I love the idea.
For sure. Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about difference between science and difference between physics and metaphysics. Science is based on needing that evidence that you can see. And metaphysics, this whole thing that they're talking about, faith, is really based on making important ethical and spiritual decisions without having any objective proof that that is the way to go. Josh, anything to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say. I gotta like make sure I keep it simple. Real quick, I will say you had asked about the section about the pets. It was 19.2 and 19.3 for those curious.
Oh, thank you.
But for this, one main thing comes to mind is the veil and how unique it is to third density. That all the other densities that we talked about or will talk about don't have this veil, and it's such a major thing that we are limited and cut off from all of creation in our conscious awareness due to this veil. And but it was, for a purpose, for efficiency. Earlier in the creation, the logoi didn't include a veil in third density, and the humans or third density entities weren't, you know, doing what they were supposed to do to evolve and grow and polarize and make this choice that we are now making blindly. Back then, they just weren't choosing because they had no veil and they were just, in a state of bliss, and everything was great. There's no, everyone was God. They were God. Everything was beautiful and perfect. So the veil is almost like you may say the root of all our problems.
Yeah, in many ways. Yeah.
Mhm.
A blessing in disguise, as it were.
Exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because I don't have passages to share on it here, and I'm not remembering where they were specifically. But as you said, every logos, every galaxy made its own decisions as far as how evolution of spirit was going to happen in that particular part of the universe. And apparently there were some logoi in the universe where they didn't have a veil of understanding. And as you said, it was really tough for entities to advance because they were in a constant state of bliss. They knew that all is one. They knew that everyone was creator. So there really wasn't any incentive, more than any of us who are really happy with our lives, having an incentive to grow or change. But yeah, that veil and making us forget everything apparently has been a great experiment from the outside point of view, and getting people to challenge themselves to polarize further. Aram, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I have something to add, and I just want to make sure. I know we only have 2 hours, and there's just like so much to dissect here. But when I was thinking about just the evolutionary process in general, like what Josh brought up about pets, like second density beings having this loving interaction or interaction with us who are higher density, helping them to evolve to third density. And I think about the fractal nature of the universe and how that process was kind of repeated when you know, when because higher density beings are not allowed to infringe on our free will, it's kind of like I think about how um, you know, wild wolves became domesticated dogs, and they say that like something like 30,000 years ago, a wolf or came to a campfire, and interacted with the humans, and they it basically kind of um, made contact with a higher density being, and it kind of took that risk because that higher density being could have easily just like killed it maybe. But so I think about when Dawn and Carla first started the act of channeling or the practice of channeling, it was kind of that risk taking, or not even knowing maybe that it could be a risk to make contact with higher density entities that are aiding in the process of moving to fourth density or moving to higher densities. So it's kind of yeah, it's that process happening over and over again. And
What a great analogy. I never thought of it that way, but yes, I can totally see that.
and I think of the veil as, when you're a second density being out in the wild, you don't you may not be aware of humans observing you. Like if there's an anthropologist like hiding in the bushes, and the bush could be that veil maybe. And so
Now that's kind of a creepy thought. Yeah. Yeah.
but
In many ways, I'm pretty sure Earth is like a big biology experiment for many other entities. I believe there's a lot of truth in that.
but it's us becoming aware that there are higher density beings.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had a couple other passages related to this. If it's okay with you, I would like to look at those. Oh, I didn't even realize there was another part of this same passage. Quo goes on to say, this is not the creator's idea of either a dirty trick or the way things should be, but rather a carefully planned schoolroom. You may leave your rulers, your protractors, your pencils and paper at home, for this is the lesson of abundant life, and homework is written in the heart, sometimes in true blood. Each of you has painfully come awake and made the choice of search. Now the lesson of this density and the choice you are to make is all about loving. One may love in one of two paths, loving the Creator by serving others, or loving the Creator by serving the self, and manipulating and controlling others that the self may be aggrandized, and as the self is aggrandized, so all glory is given to the Creator. We teach the positive or service to others path. We believe that this choice of service to others offers the swiftest road of spiritual evolution. Spiritual evolution being evolution itself, from this time forward, as you have completed the evolution of the particular physical vehicle in which you move about at this time. Yeah, I know there's been many times when they've referred to our existence as a school of souls, and that the lessons are of love. Everything that we see, starting at this density in particular, seems to be about learning how to love and come closer and closer to that one original thought of love, which is the Creator. Anybody have any thoughts on this before we move on to a couple other passages? Sorry for forgetting this part. Grace?
Just a quick thought. I think it's really important that we recognize kind of what Josh was saying about the veil and creating the polarity, because that is so important. Because in the East, we have this monistic idea of, oneness, and obviously the law of one talks about this oneness. But what the law of one also does is it talks about polarity. It acknowledges this positive, negative aspect within our experience in third density, while also giving, credence to the fact that we do come from one source. I like the idea that, we really hit on polarity in the veil.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and if it's okay with you, let's take a look at a couple other verses from the raw contact that speak to this a little bit more. In session 19, question 15, Ra said, the second density concept of serving the self includes the serving of those associated with tribe or pack. This is not seen in second density as separation of self and other self. All is seen as self, since in some forms of second density entities, if the tribe or pack becomes weakened, so does the entity within the tribe or pack. The new or initial third density entity has this innocent, shall we say, bias or distortion towards viewing those in the family, the society, as you would call perhaps country, as self. Thus, though a distortion not helpful for progress in third density, it is without polarity. The break becomes apparent when the entity perceives other selves as other selves and consciously determines to manipulate other selves for the benefit of the self. This is the beginning of the road of which you speak, the service to self path. The questioner then asks, then through free will, sometime in the third density experience, the path splits and an entity consciously, probably does not consciously choose. Does an entity consciously choose this path at the initial splitting point? Ra says, I am Ra. We speak in generalities, which is dangerous, for always inaccurate. However, we realize you look for the overview, so we will eliminate anomalies and speak of majorities. The majority of third density being is far along the chosen path before realization of that path is conscious. I find that super fascinating, and I think this is something I asked Jim about at our last question and answer session, whether in order to graduate from third density to fourth density, it was enough just to be thinking of your family and your friends or your tribe 51% of the time or more, or if you actually have to have love for those who are not already people that you like or love. And I think that passage was kind of speaking to that. Saying that it's really important to be able to think beyond your loved ones, your family already. And I love the idea that they're kind of pointing out that most people are subconsciously following one path or another before they even realize they're on that path. And I think that's kind of the point of these podcasts, is to wake people up and to let people know that there is an important choice to make, to choose the path of service to others or service to self if you want to graduate and move on to the next level. We have more passages related to that specifically, but panelists, did you have anything on this part? Grace, any thoughts on these couple passages?
No, I was thinking, and if you guys could possibly clarify, in the raw contact, it was spoken that, I'm sorry, a little bit off. Like the second density animal has all of the energy centers, correct? But only the lower two were activated at the time. And then and then as a human, we have the lower three activated because we're in a third density yellow. Excuse me, Josh, could you correct that line of thinking?
I don't know if I'm 100% accurate here, but I think what Ross said is yes, the second densities have the lower two activated and the rest in potentiation. But in third
Okay.
density, we do have all of them able to be activated or activated. But yeah, I believe they use that terminology that even I think when Don was asking for the first part of life, like in any part of the universe, they're all in potentiation, but it depends on what is activated. And yeah, third density is the first density. I believe that they're all activated, but some
Thanks for
more than
clarifying.
others, blocked, some et cetera, out of balance.
That's a
Thank you.
great
Sorry.
question. Great answer. Yeah, appreciate that. I was not sure of that myself. Yeah. Uh, uh, Josh, anything to add on these passages?
The one thing that comes to mind was on that last bit about the majority, already chose the path without realization that the path that is conscious. Brings to mind that they say that, being aware of the law of one is not required for harvest, for graduation, I should say. And that um, you can still, be service to others 51% of the time without knowing you are, right? That's what they're saying there.
For sure.
Um, and that there is, I don't know if it's too soon if you want me to hold off, but the concept of the sinkhole of indifference.
This would be a great time to bring that up. Why don't you go ahead, share a bit about that?
Right. So for some people who aren't awake or haven't become consciously aware of, a polarity, Ra calls them being in the sinkhole of indifference, being too far below the minimum requirements to graduate in either polarity, positive or negative, which technically would be less than 51% service to others and less than 95% service to self. Between that is sinkhole of indifference. And right now on Earth, a lot, if not most of the people are within that range. And the Confederation and Wanderers are here to shrink that, to increase the polarization, positive or negative. We're on the positive side, but we want people to make the choice and intend and think and act um, of others more than themselves, at least half the time.
For sure. Yeah, and that reminds me of the little bit that I highlighted from the first passage where they said the break becomes apparent when the entity perceives other selves as other selves and consciously determines to manipulate other selves for the benefit of self. I would appear that a big part of third density is recognizing creator in yourself and or other selves. And I think they're saying that you consciously choose the service to self path when you do actually see other selves as other selves, but consciously determine to manipulate them for your own benefit. That would be the beginning of a much longer and more difficult path, according to our friends in the Confederation. Aram, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's jumping ahead, but I'm already thinking about the density of unity
Mm,
and where when you think about everything is the creator, and it's just the creator expressing itself in as different individuated pieces of life. And so it's kind of like bringing everyone back into the fold when you reach that seventh density. And so I think of it as like I had a hard time initially when I was learning about the law of one and the negative path or the negatively polarized path because we don't see them as ourselves. We judge them and think of them as something separate that we don't want to interact with. But really, when you can love even the negative path, you're kind of bringing them back into the fold.
that's a beautiful way to say it. Yeah, so perfect. And we are most definitely going to be getting into that shortly. Shall we take a closer look at this thing called graduation or harvest? Graduation, also known as harvest, can be considered the process of making the leap from one density to the next. And it seems to happen for both individuals as well as the planetary population as a collective or group. So as you can see, and as we have mentioned, at third density, in order to move on, to evolve, to grow spiritually, to move on to the next level, apparently we need to make a choice between the service to others path or the service to self path. You can think of the service to others path as seeing the creator both in yourself and in all others. It involves unconditional love for others as well as yourself, acceptance of others, respecting the free will of others, and radiating light, you could say. It is known as the positive path that's centered on truth. And in order to graduate to fourth density on the service to others path, as we have said, you need to be vibrating at a 51% service to others level, meaning you're thinking of others a little bit more than yourself, at least a little bit more than yourself, and 49% service to self, meaning you're not thinking only of yourself more than 49% of the time. The service to self path could be described as seeing the creator only in yourself and not in others. It involves unconditional love for yourself and control of others, not recognizing the free will of others, and can be seen as absorbing light rather than radiating. It is also referred to as the negative path, and it's based on lies, falsehoods, and deceptions as opposed to truth. The first lie or deception being that others are not the creator. And supposedly, in order to graduate to fourth density on the service to self path, you need to be vibrating at least at a 95% service to self, 5% service to others, meaning you're only thinking of your well-being like 95% of the time and not thinking of the well-being of others more than 5% of the time. And it cannot be emphasized enough that in session 7, question number 15, Ross said, the law of one blinks neither at the light or the darkness, but is available for service to others and service to self. This is probably one of the hardest things for people on the service to others path to grasp or to accept, that from this perspective, good is not inherently better than evil. And that God is actually okay with both. And you actually need both for wholeness, much the way the yin yang symbol, in order to have completeness, you need both the light and the dark. But they are both different paths to recognizing the creator in yourself and in others. Panelists, anything you want to add? Anything I missed on the comparison of service to others, service to self path? On August 24th, 2005, Kuo was recorded as saying, "It is not often understood among your peoples that it is extremely difficult to achieve a service to others rating of 51% or greater. Indeed, in our opinion, it is as difficult to achieve that rating as it is to achieve the obviously difficult rating of 5% service to others, which is the standard for graduation from third density for those who are seeking along the path of service to self. In the case of service to self polarity, it is overtly clear as to why it would be difficult to achieve such a rating. The purity of thought necessary to achieve the level of self-discipline and control inherent in seeking to control others 95% of the time is patent. There is no one who would argue that it is an extremely difficult and challenging feat to achieve such a polarity. It is far more difficult to see into service to others to understand why it would not be equivalent to attempt to attain a service to others polarity of 95% service to others as a balance to 95% service to self and the opposite polarity. However, the orientation of third density is geared towards a world that is not neutral, but that is outwardly biased towards service to self. I really appreciate that last part there where they're explaining why the graduation requirement for service to others is just 51% as opposed to 95%. They're just saying the world is outwardly biased towards service to self, which makes it really harder to think of others at least 51% of the time. I just love getting that confirmation since, yeah, that's the way the world looks to me too. Really does seem like the world has an outward bias towards service to self. And again, I guess that's just part of the challenge to take on faith that in spite of all that catalyst and all those appearances, that to still choose to love others more than yourself or care for the well-being of others more than yourself. That's the big test, the big challenge here. Any thoughts, reflections on anything here, Josh?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that quote as well. It one thing that comes to mind as to, like you said, the world is geared towards service to self or biased, that is so clear in our day and age now. Ross says somewhere else that the high elites who control governments and military and corporations are where you would find the service to self highly polarized entities. And the monetary system, that we all need money to survive and buy food and shelter and so on, is a clear control thing that we're being manipulated on our core root red ray survival by those high entities that control the banks and all the industries that are forcing everyone to work for them, to be for
And media.
yeah, and the media, right? That's so it's very clear how the bias of the world is, and the how the positions of power they hold, but to how simple it is for us, regardless of that situation, when you're awakened to the spiritual path and your focus and goal is for evolution and to aid the planet and others, to simply love everyone and serve others, more than yourself half the time. It as Quo says, it's just as difficult, but if you put your mind to it, it's not like you need to, overthrow a government or anything. Just, help your neighbor bring in their groceries, or, give your spouse the larger half of the sandwich. They gave that example somewhere, and just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I appreciated that sandwich example. That's a passage that we're not sharing here today, but it's one that stuck with me a lot also. They suggested that people just think of 51% STO as just kind of naturally offering the larger half a sandwich to somebody else, just as a natural instinct. And as I think you're saying, Josh, it might not come naturally to people now, but like exercise, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So I appreciate your sharing that. Aram, anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add at this time. I think maybe later.
Sounds great. Grace, anything to add?
Yeah, I really appreciate Josh's perspective and kind of bringing this down to earth in our experience. I think about how we, like Josh said, like on the seeking path, you just eventually, after, at first, it's a little bit effortful to think of others more than yourself. Or like this active kind of thought, like, am I doing this right? But as we further our seeking and ennoble our true desires and be more authentic within ourselves, it just comes naturally. There's not this pressure of, oh my gosh, I need to serve others. It's just what you do. And I love that. I also like the idea, I feel like vindicated that yes, third density is definitely geared towards others. And I often, excuse me, towards the self. And I often feel like I'm speaking against the grain when I'm sharing my ideals with people of how we need to support each other. And I get often people saying, that's not the way it works. That's not how it is. And Josh kind of led into that with our systems being set up in a way that's like hierarchical and how we are all being almost forced into this manipulation um, of serving ourselves in a lot of cases. And I think that that's what we're working to change here. And that's what's changing very rapidly is that people no longer want to participate in systems that are oppressive. People are actively speaking out more and more, especially with the younger generations, about how, this is the way it's been and is, but this isn't how we want to continue doing things. And I love being here to see that.
And being a part of it as well, of helping. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it. To me, when I'm listening to everyone's comments, it just kind of takes me back to the original premise of the law of one, which is that all is one and that one thing is love. And if you make that leap to see creator in yourself, being able to see creator in yourself as well as in all others, then I think maybe it becomes more automatic that you would be more considerate of others that way. But that continues to be the challenge. And I did want to piggyback on what Grace just said about this feeling of anxiety a lot of people have about having to pass a test to graduate. On October 14th, 2005, Quo is recorded as saying, "We would note that to those who perceive at the heart level the absolute centrality of service to others as a polarized choice, it is close to inevitable that at the moment of death and the entry into graduation, your vibratory level will reflect that basic choice. Once you have awakened and begun the process of spiritual seeking, the odds are heavily in your favor that your vibratory level at that time will reflect a satisfactory level of service to others, polarity for you to be able to have the opportunity to graduate. We say this in order to take away the feeling of needing to pass a test. It is the essence of the grasping of the centrality of the choice of service to others as a polarity that is the most substantial part of how your energy body will be vibrating at the time of your passing through that gateway, rather than the day-to-day details that vary according to those transient and ephemeral circumstances that come and go, rise and fall away again and again in the course of any lifetime. Therefore, rather than being overly concerned about any one choice, any one day, or any one action, keep moving back in your mind to the central point and to your first faithful choice of polarity. Affirm and reaffirm that choice. This is your fulcrum. This is the source of your power as a choice-making spiritual seeker. Then each day, let the day be a new one and see what you can do to make this day a day in which you have upheld that basic choice to the very best of your ability as a spiritual seeker. Cannot emphasize enough that the words that we just read came through this process of channeling, and the person who was saying these words had no idea what words were going to come out. They had some idea how to finish a sentence, and maybe they saw the beginning of the next sentence, but everything that you see or that you on your screen or that you just heard being read, really that person didn't know what they were going to be saying. And it's just so beautiful to be able to see that insight and that love and compassion into this process of spiritual evolution that we're talking about. And I love the idea of not having to pass a test. It's really just being your vibrational level. It kind of reminds me, if you take like liquids of different densities and pour them into a tall, skinny glass, how they'll just kind of separate naturally according to their densities. And I think that's what they're saying here. Do the best you can. Once you commit to thinking of others at least as much as yourself, just commit to that and keep doing it. And whatever you end up being, you'll end up going wherever your vibratory nature is, and it'll feel good. Wherever you end up going, it'll feel like the place for you to be naturally, I think. Aram, any thoughts on this passage or anything else?
Yeah, I think a big part of service is intention. And I'm like, at first I was like, oh my God, I have to graduate. I have to just like serve, serve, serve. And then I relaxed a bit and realized that kind of what was alluded to in the earlier passage, uh, it's like you'd probably already kind of had an idea of which polarity you were going to be when you incarnated. And so, I can just relax and know that I am on the service to others' path, and really just having the loving intention to move in that direction and to serve others is kind of what is more driving me than, oh my God, I gotta serve. Like it it helps with just knowing that, you know, um, it's more about the feeling in your heart and your intention than the actual actions that you're doing. So yeah, and knowing that, when you are serving, I have to ask myself sincerely, like, what is my motivation? Do I have an ulterior motive when I'm doing this service, or is this coming from a pure place of just unconditional love?
Yeah, really a beautiful way to say it. And it's beautiful to realize that we're wired to feel good when we help others. That, as they have said many times, service to others is in fact service to self, partly because of the good feeling that you get. But also, if you're creator and they're creator, then when you're doing something for somebody else, you are inherently doing something for yourself at the same time. What a beautiful reminder of that. Grace, anything to add?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. It's this idea in psychology of altruism. Like, are you doing, when you do the good thing, are you also benefiting? And Ra says that, all paradoxes become solved. You can also serve others and serve yourself because you're all one. And I love that. Like, thank goodness. I love this passage because, like Aram said, like at first, like, holy cow, I'm like, holy shit, I gotta serve everyone. And very soon after that, I realized, naturally, I have natural biases based on other lifetimes or other experiences where I'm just, I want to help others. And that took off a lot of the pressure. Um, I think that was it for me. Thanks.
Yeah, and I appreciate your bringing it up, since it is really easy to fall into the same trap that a lot of Christians, shall we say, do, that they're being nice to other people mainly so that they get into heaven. And same thing here. You could easily fall into the trap where you're being nice to other people, not altruistically, like you're saying, but you're doing it so that you can get to the next level. And I think that is sort of missing the point, and probably not going to help you achieve that natural vibration level that perhaps is really needed. And as they have said many times, it's okay if you don't graduate on either path. You just repeat your incarnation on another third density planet, and that's okay. You have all the time in the universe to grow, and everything will be.
Right. I'm sorry, I remembered my other thought. I blanked there for a second, but I wanted to share, before I found the Law of One, I was an atheist for about 10 years, like didn't believe in God, didn't want anything to do with it. And I I realized that there's something beautiful in the atheist because when you don't believe in God, but you're still doing good, there's something really beautiful about that because you're doing good based on you wanting to do good. There's no external kind of thought process behind it. It's just the intention, like Aram was saying. So I love that.
Me too. Josh, anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what you just mentioned, Grace, and Aram brought up about intention. I think it's very important, and the Confederation says that, intention is more not judged, but reviewed or weighted than your actions and thoughts and results. So if you saw some situation and you wanted to help someone or had good intentions of doing something positive of service to others, but when you went and tried to do it, you know, it didn't work out, or something didn't, the goal didn't get accomplished, or you said the wrong words or something, that doesn't matter. Whereas, in the life review at the end of your incarnation, where you determine your harvestability and how your lessons and so on, what you're not quote unquote graded by is your intention in that situation. So I think having a good intention, open heart, is very important, and not to worry if it didn't come out perfect. But just knowing the thought is what counts. And one other quick thing in regards of like consciously making that choice and to not kind of lose sight of it, or slip into sinkhole of indifference or whatever. One thing that I've been doing that I think may help those who would like to increase their positive polarization or maintain it, maybe if they're not as naturally gifted as you all are, is doing a daily affirmation or gratitude prayer that I do in the morning, that you restate, how can I be of service to others, or how can I be more loving to others, just make it part of a daily routine to, in addition to whatever else you do, whatever prayers or affirmations or calling on guides and angels and so on, but to state your desire to serve others and ask for guidance on and opportunities to serve. So
That's a really beautiful point. I really appreciate your bringing that up. And that's something I've made a habit of doing also in my morning prayers, is to ask for help from my guardian angels and spirit guides to open my heart more in unconditional love and to be of service to others. And I think that's what they're suggesting in this passage, that once you've made that central choice and you commit to it and make that central to your everyday life, it's almost inevitable that you will graduate to fourth density or beyond if you came from there originally. If it's okay with you, so far we have been talking about graduation as individuals. I had a couple passages that I wanted to look at that relate to how we graduate as a collective. In session 13 of the Raw Contact, and in question 23, the question was asked, how does a third density planet become a fourth density? And Ra said, the fourth density is, as we have said, is as regularized in its approach as the striking of a clock upon the hour. The space-time of your solar system has enabled this planetary sphere to spiral into space-time of a different vibrational configuration. This causes the planetary sphere to be able to be molded by these new distortions. However, the thought forms of your people during this transition period are such that the mind-body-spirit complexes of both individual and societies are scattered through the spectrum instead of being able to grasp the needle, shall we say, and point the compass in one direction. And in session 17, question 33, Ross said, to attain 51% dedication to the welfare of others is as difficult as attaining a grade of 5% dedication to other selves. The, shall we say, sinkhole of indifference is between the two. That sinkhole of indifference being what Josh was alluding to earlier. Yeah, I think it is worth noting that our friends in the Confederation have described our planet's evolution as like movement along a giant galactic clock face, where somehow the Earth, our solar system, is moving into an area of space-time or time-space, where we are moving out of third density vibrations into an area of fourth density vibrations. And they have said that our planet is already vibrating fully in fourth density, positive. It's just that humanity itself is lagging behind because, as you know, they talked about moving the needle, and as you can see the picture on your screen, what would be needed to graduate is for some critical mass of humanity to consciously choose the service to others path. And I think it's fair to say majority of people are already inclined to do that. Most people would rather live in a world of love and peace rather than one of fear and control, fear and war and bellicosity. It's just that we do in fact have people, a majority of people are trying to move towards service to others, but there is a significant minority of people who are in fact trying to graduate on the service to self path. So there is this constant tug of war between those two forces, making it really difficult to move that needle towards service to others, so that as a whole we can graduate and form that social memory complex, which we are apparently destined to become one way or the other. Grace, any thoughts on these passages?
I just kind of have this ruminating question. I wonder if our planet spiraling into that next vibration is like a physical planetary movement. Because I think of like the zodiacal kind of uh, constellations in the sky and how the sun raises at a certain point. And I wonder if it's something similar on a much larger scale, a galactic scale of our sun and planet moving in a very specific location in space time. I'm just a thought.
It's a great question. I'm sure it's one that everybody has wondered about. And I don't know if it's our planet moving within the Milky Way galaxy into a new area, or it's the whole galaxy moving into a new area. I don't really know. Did you guys, Aram or Josh, you have any idea what the deal is in that respect?
I had suspected that myself, just intuitively got an image of, and yeah, I can't say for sure if it's the solar system, planet, solar system, or galaxy, but I think the fact that there is this 75,000 year cycle, like Jonathan says, like a clock, we know things orbit, which is similar to the clock. So that, to me, that coincides with it's a new area. One thing that had come to mind once in the meditation was they talk about the great central sun at the center of the universe that's radiating constantly, the source of everything. And that I can got a sense that maybe we were kind of, like my background, right? Like, like maybe we're out here on this arm of this spiral galaxy. And maybe in front of us, there's something that we're in the shadow of. So as we're moving, maybe we're coming out of the shadow. So it's like a gradual crossfade into more light. Um, I don't think it's exactly that, but as an analogy or something.
It's a great analogy, great way to look at it, I think. Did you have any other thoughts on anything else in this passage, Josh?
Oh, no, that's all.
Aram?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this passage, and I do think that, that the Earth is moving in or is already in fourth density. So the Earth has already moved into the portion of the galaxy or the universe where we are being bathed in fourth density light. And in terms of like us as humanity moving the needle, I actually think that um, there are a lot more people who are quietly serving in their own communities without fanfare, and we just never hear about it. And I think we're under the impression that there's a lot less harmony and a lot more discord than there actually is, because that is what gets the attention of the media or social media. And it's kind of like, the people who are serving. I mean, I'm imagining groups of people all around the world just, getting together and discussing spiritual things like we are, where they have no attention placed on them. And I that's what I would like to imagine, that there's actually much more, we're pushing the needle much further along than we actually know, because it's being done quietly.
I think that's a super important thing for people to remember. Appreciate you bringing it up. Yeah, I think it would be fair to say there is a significant number of entities on planet Earth that are, in fact, trying to graduate on the service to self path and realizing that there's no way Earth is going to become a service to self planet. The best they can do is either prevent it from becoming service to others or delay the graduation of humanity as a whole for as long as they can. And as you guys have already mentioned, those entities seem to be in charge of our social and economic and political systems and control our media. And the best way to keep us from polarizing towards service to others is just keep us in a perpetual state of fear and conflict against each other. So within us, I think the best thing that we can do is try to realize that and to not be tricked into being afraid and being angry and being constantly at war with others. If it's okay with you, can we move on to fourth density? Anybody have anything else they wanted to add before we do that?
I just had one quick thing that I remembered in regards to the planet moving to fourth density, and if it's in a new part in space. They talk about a core vibration, that each density has a core vibration of the photon that makes up everything, that is the light. So I had this thought of, like, if the planet Earth is on a fourth density core vibration, but the people aren't there yet, I almost think of it as like if you microwave frozen food, the center gets hot and then it radiates outward. So we're the people on the outside that we're gotta match the core vibration of the planet. When it breaks down, it's the photons that makes up the atoms, the molecules, the people, the etc. So there's also an aspect that's an inside out aspect.
What a great way to look at it. I never thought of it that way. But I'm getting hungry now, now that you mention it. Yeah. Let's take a look at fourth density, also known as the density of love. In session 16 of the Raw Contact, question 50, Ra is recorded as saying, "We ask you to consider as we speak that there are no words for positively describing fourth density. We can only explain what is not and approximate what is. Beyond fourth density, our ability grows more limited still until we become without words. That which fourth density is not, it is not of words unless chosen. It is not of heavy chemical bodies for body complex activities. It is not of disharmony within self. It is not of disharmony within peoples. It is not within limits of possibility to cause disharmony in any way." Sounds so different from third density as we know it. They continue. Approximations of positive statements. It is a plane of a type of bipedal vehicle which is much denser and more full of life. It is a plane wherein one is aware of the thoughts of other selves. It is a plane where one is aware of the vibrations of other selves. It is a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of third density. It is a plane striving towards wisdom or light. It is a plane wherein individual differences are pronounced, although automatically harmonized by group consensus. Yeah, somebody said this just a few minutes ago, and I appreciate your bringing that up, because I don't think we've really said that much in these podcasts. Apparently, the difference between all of these densities refers to the density of light. That's why they're called densities in the first place. As you go to higher and higher densities, according to what we've read in these channeling sessions, the light is increasingly dense. It has more information in it. It has more truth in it, such that, as they're saying, when you are in fourth density, there really is no need for words anymore. It would seem that telepathic communication is the way to go, and that all harmonies are resolved by group consensus. I love that part of being aware of the vibrations of other selves. That seems like something people are getting more in tune with. It's a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of third density. It's a beautiful picture, I think. Josh, anything to share on this passage?
The one thing that stands out to me, because is the aspect of fourth density social memory complex of telepathy between individuals knowing each other's thoughts. Is one is aware of the thoughts of other selves, and I've been hearing things lately of the people being born in these dual body activated uh, people come down to Earth now, who some may, I have reason to believe that the nonverbal autistic children are a big example of that, as they scientifically provables exhibiting telepathy with a near 100% accuracy. So, and knowing others' thoughts, other people who work with them, having them in their head, and vice versa. So I'm seeing that more and more now. As we know, autism is growing in cases around the world. It kind of corresponds with the dual body activated individuals who are forming Earth's fourth density social memory complex. And,
Which would explain why the Telepathy Tapes podcast seems to be like so popular these days. Have you listened to many of those episodes, Josh? Have you listened to them all?
oh yeah, yes, I have.
Nice.
It's amazing. Highly recommend it to everyone. I was shocked where I saw it was #1 podcast for some time. Highly recommend anyone listening to check them out.
Yeah, I think that affirms what Aram was saying also about, it's not reported in the news because that's not what news corporations want you to hear. But yeah, I think the fact that it's such a popular thing and resonating with so many people, I think is kind of an indication that, yeah, this stuff is kind of catching on and people are kind of picking up on it consciously or subconsciously. Aram, anything to add? Any thoughts, reflections on this?
Yeah, I feel like I've had experiences where there it feels like there is a glimpse into early fourth density. I've gone on long weekend meditation trips with a group of people where by the end of it, it feels like fourth density. You're just bathed in ecstasy and unconditional love, and you can just feel the unity. And of course, it's fleeting. It doesn't last, but it's like you got a taste of it, and you know that it's possible. And the thing that, stands out to me in um, this passage, it says it's a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of third density. And, when you start to realize like all the trauma and the harm that has been caused because of this um, you know, kind of misinformed belief that we are separate, and the harm that's been caused to each other. When we realize that, it was just a misunderstanding and that all is forgivable and all can be healed and loved, that feels like it. I can already see fourth density happening here on the planet.
Well said. So beautiful. Yeah, yeah, I agree completely with everything that you said. Grace, anything to add?
Nothing for me.
That's good. I had a couple other passages related to fourth density that I wanted to look at. On November 28th, 2004, Quo said, "Each time you choose to trust, to love, to have forbearance and compassion, to see the other person's point of view and truly walk in his shoes instead of your own, you are expanding the kingdom of fourth density right where you are. And the more people that begin consciously to do this, the faster this kingdom will expand. We say to you plainly, fourth density is all but complete." And that was in 2004. On December 9th, 2001, Kuo said, third density entities finding themselves to be running fourth density energy greatly aid in the formation of the fourth density social memory complex simply by opening the heart to the extent that those moments are possible. Really seems to affirm what we have been talking about for the last few minutes, and I really appreciate, Aram, your sharing all those examples of people who are awakening to this and already kind of starting to vibe in fourth density. It's a beautiful thing. The only thing I could add, I think, is the opening of the heart. When one looks at the current political environment, for example, it's so easy to close your heart in fear and anger and frustration. And I'm sure that is part of the agenda of service to self entities who want nothing more than for us to be constantly warring against each other. But if you really want to help fourth density come about, figuring out how to open your heart yourself is probably the best way to get others to do likewise. That's my take on it, at least. Aram, do you have any thoughts on these couple passages?
Yeah, I have thoughts, and I might share them in the later densities because it feels related.
Sounds good. Grace?
Yeah, just shortly, I really like this passage because I really feel like it's speaking to the heart of this idea of empathy and having the ability to feel another's pain. And I see that evolving, which is so exciting. It's awesome to see this concept of empathy evolving within other people and seeing it more and more because it's a direct reflection of the super sensible spiritual world, except it's a concept that we can grasp. And I think it's beautiful. I like it a lot.
Well said. Yeah, beautiful indeed. Josh, anything on this? Anything to add?
Yeah, I know it's a big topic, so I won't go into it in detail, but it reminds me, opening the heart and the kingdom of fourth densities right where you are. Reminds me, Jesus was a fourth density wanderer, came to earth, says the kingdom of God is within you. He's open-hearted love, compassion, unconditional love. So just want to share that.
Yeah, so beautiful indeed. And yes, it is worth reminding folks that fourth density is referred to as the density of love, or the density of love and understanding. And that would appear to have been Jesus's mission to come here as an incarnation, as a wanderer, to point people to be a way shower towards the unconditional love of fourth density. Which leads us into fifth density, also known as the density of wisdom. On September 28th, 2019, Kuo said, "The wisdom of the blue ray is the wisdom which sees the world about it in a clear light. The wisdom or the compassion of the green ray is that which sees all as objects and beings of the one creator that are to be loved without discrimination, without any holding back, shall we say. Thus, the blue ray entity may, as you have described, be somewhat cold in its estimation and communication with other entities if the green ray energy center within it has not been activated. However, it will not be, shall we say, fooled by other entities as easily as the one who has the green ray open without the activation of blue ray." So many times our friends in the Confederation have said that pretty much everyone who's on Earth right now incarnated here largely for the purpose of learning how to balance energies of love and wisdom, love being the energy of fourth density and wisdom being the energy of fifth density. So I love the idea here that green ray really is about unconditional love for all without any discrimination, and blue ray is more about learning how to make discernments between those who perhaps mean you well and perhaps those who don't mean you well, and they are perhaps not as easily fooled as those who are perhaps more naive, shall we say, in their unconditional love for all. It's a tough balance that I think all of us are challenged to strike these days. Did you have any thoughts on this, Grace?
Yes, I see having like the open heart, the green ray as being vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, there is a possibility of being hurt by others. Um, I can definitely see that in the last statement here. But I've really seen this transition and balance between this fifth density of wisdom and the fourth density of love within myself and how I'm trying to balance that more. In the past, I was very much so wisdom, discernment, that's it. And I think a personal example is like I thought that when somebody does something wrong, they should definitely pay their dues. I think that that could be seen in like the death penalty, let's say. And as I've developed this more green ray understanding and appreciation and love for everyone, I definitely see the value in life and of people, and even when they make mistakes. And it's just this beautiful balancing that you're kind of straddling a little bit, but at the heart of it, you are loving everyone while also using your discernment. I can definitely see how it can come off as cold if you are unbalanced and more so like definitely like wisdom and that's it.
Well said. Yeah, agree 100%. Josh, anything to add?
No, I'll wait till the next one to share. Thank you.
You bet. Aram?
Yeah, I think about this process of evolution, where they talk about how, you can activate the different chakras in the chakra system, but you can skip over the heart. Like if you are on the service to self path, your ability to you maybe activate the fifth chakra or the sixth chakra where you're doing work, um, you know, in higher levels of consciousness, but it's devoid of the heart and the love coming from the green ray. It feels like, there is there's the ability to manipulate people if you activate these upper chakras and not have it be heart centered, and I feel like there we have this nervous system that runs along the entire length of the body, and the scientists are now talking about how you have the intellect, but the heart and the gut also have a brain, or a way of experiencing that maybe is different from the synapses in the brain, and kind of bringing that heart center in to everything that you do. It feels like that is the key to making it back to unity.
For sure. Yeah, it reminds me, there's been quite a few times that our friends in the Confederation and Carla herself has said many times too that the longest journey we take in this life is the 14 inches between our minds and our hearts, our brains and our hearts. So, yeah, learning how to think with your heart is truly the challenge for many of us here. I'm always trying to learn how to be more unconditionally loving. It's something I'm definitely grappling with every day. But I think I'm doing better at it than I was a year ago, and hopefully even better next year. Shall we take a look at another couple passages on fifth density? On November 11th, 2023, Quo said, "The fifth dimension is that which is vibrating within the nature of wisdom, the light that shines upon the creation in an enhanced sense, so that the entities existing within the fifth dimension are those which have learned the ways of laws of love that are the primary feature of the fourth dimension. The fifth dimension then enhances the quality and quantity of love's ability to manifest light in a way which shows a greater and greater reality, the nature of the one infinite creator. This is the dimension in which this lesson is manifested as wisdom within each seeker of truth that inhabits the fifth density. It is the wisdom of discernment, the wisdom of seeing the truer nature of creation so that there is a greater ability to serve the one creator by reflecting the light or wisdom to all about one, and to offer oneself in service to others within the lower dimensions, especially that which is the third dimension that you now inhabit. Many come from the fifth dimension as what you would call wanderers, who offer themselves in service to your planet to lighten the planetary vibrations by their very presence, and to engage in the serving of others in whatever manner is their own particular talents. Thus, each dimension from the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth then may offer the wanderer as a means by which to enhance the planetary vibrations and be of service in that regard. Worth noting, as you can see here, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast episode, the words density and dimensions are used more or less interchangeably by our friends in the Confederation, and they seem to mean more or less the same thing here. Josh, was there something you wanted to share? Any thoughts, reflections on this passage?
Yeah. In regards to the fifth density nature of discernment, wisdom of discernment, one thing that comes to mind is the balancing the bias towards martyrdom of those with an overactivated green ray or fourth density like energies, such as Jesus, who we know is crucified, fully unconditional love, and even Carla, who channeled Ra, had such an activated green ray that she was giving all her energy to doing the channeling to the point of physical deterioration or harm. And she would have kept going, and Ra had to constantly remind them for Jim and Dawn to take care of her and like to space out the channelings for her to recover and so on. So just shows that the fifth density vantage works on seeing the better productivity or efficiency of not martyring oneself as to sustain the rock contact, right? If she just gave her all and they were just channeling nonstop, she probably wouldn't have lasted 4 years, since they wound up stretching it out over weeks or months toward the end.
Right. Yeah, appreciate your sharing that for sure. And I guess I'm reminded of what we said earlier, and that it would appear that everything that we see in these densities is about learning the lessons of love, starting all the way with the base elements at first density to plants and animals and second density to humans, cetaceans and third density to whatever form of being we have in fourth density. But it's about learning more and more those lessons of love. And what you're talking about, I think, is the lessons of how to love unconditionally without necessarily martyring yourself in the process. It's a tricky balance for sure. Aram, anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to say I have a hard time thinking about these higher densities because I can only imagine like, a lower density, like second density being like, I don't know, trying to conceptualize like what we're doing here on Zoom. But yeah, I struggle a lot when I think of what those higher densities must be like. And part of, I guess, my path is like not thinking too hard about the details and just having more faith and intuition that when those details are necessary, they're going to come to me. But yeah, sometimes
For sure.
just my brain feels like I don't have the capacity in this body to really understand what's happening up there.
No, indeed. And as I've said before, it's a beautiful thing to see this map of evolution showing us where we've been in the distant past, as well as we're headed in the distant future. And yeah, you can see the quantum leaps between first and second density, going from inanimate matter to animate matter. You can see the quantum leap from second density to third density, going from plants and lower animals to humans and cetaceans. You can see the quantum leap from third density to fourth density, going from the consciousness of a single person, for example, to a social memory complex, an entire planetary consciousness. I don't know what the comparable quantum leap is from fourth density to fifth density, but like you said, I just trust that the pattern that we've seen from first through fourth goes on, and apparently there's some other comparable quantum leap from fifth density to sixth density that is, I mean, millions of years ahead of us that I think is just beyond our ability to understand. But as you mentioned, yeah, I believe in fourth density, it would appear that we still have similar chemical bodies. They're just lighter bodies, you could say. Whereas in fifth density, I believe it said that entities exist in light bodies, and that lasts for about 50 million years. And then sixth density, which I believe can last 75 million years, entities exist as pure light, which I think we're going to get into later. Grace, anything to add on fifth density here?
Nothing from me.
Let's take a look at sixth density. In session 70 of the Raw Contact, question 9, Raw said, "You are existing at all levels simultaneously. It is specifically correct that your higher self is you in mid-sixth density, and in your way of measuring what you know as time, your higher self is yourself in the future." In session 36, question 7, Ra said, "The higher self aspect is aware of the lessons learned through the sixth density. The progress rate is fairly well understood. The choices which must be made to achieve the higher self as it is are in the provenance of the mind-body-spirit complex itself. Thus, the higher self is like the map in which the destination is known. The roads are very well known, these roads being designed by intelligent infinity, working through intelligent energy. However, the higher self aspect can program only for the lessons and certain predisposing limitations if it wishes. The remainder is completely the free choice of each entity. There is the perfect balance between the known and the unknown." Yeah, there are a couple of significant things that happen in sixth density which are worth noting, and one of those is the higher self. I believe higher self is mentioned in many different metaphysical teachings and learnings and communities and so on, but in the law of one cosmology, the higher self is apparently our future self in mid-sixth density. And before it leaves, that higher self is sent back in order to help all of ourselves in lower densities to plan our incarnations, the lessons that we need to learn, and provide guidance as needed. But at the same time, everything that we do in our third density incarnations is by free will, and we're behind the veil of forgetting. So we forgot whatever it is that we planned pre-incarnatively with our higher self. So we still have free will to choose whatever path we go on. But as Quo said at some point, whatever path you choose, the lessons that you plan to learn in this incarnation will be there on either path. And the Creator is always with you every step of the way, which I find hugely reassuring. Aram, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, I feel like there are times when I can actually commune with my higher self, and that's usually when I get into a deeper state of meditation. And it's not it I don't always sometimes I do feel like I get direct information from my higher self, but most of the time it shows up in um synchronicities or signs or, guidance or a feeling or an opportunity. And yeah, it feels like you're kind of being given breadcrumbs, and you're not given you're just given like a little portion at a time. And I think about there's a tarot card, I believe it's um the Hermit, I can't remember, but it's holding a lantern, and really it's just like the light from the lantern is only illuminating like the next couple of steps. And that's kind of what I feel like my higher self is always communicating to me. It doesn't give me the whole plan. It just shows me when the time is right, what the next step is. And that's just my personal journey.
What a beautiful visual. Yeah, I really appreciate your sharing that. never thought of it that way, but I think I know which archetype you're referring to. Grace, anything to add?
Just a thought as we were reading this, Aram, I love that analogy of the lamp. That's really profound to me. I'm definitely going to meditate on that later. I think that because sixth density, all of the paradoxes are solved, it really, for us right now to like read this passage and think, okay, our future self who knows everything, but we're allowed to make choices. It brings up all of these paradoxical questions. And I like to ponder that a lot and consider like, if I make this choice, am I changing my higher self? Which higher self am I getting? It's a really interesting concept to think about.
It is for sure. Yeah. Josh, anything to add?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind on this topic of the sixth density higher self is the analogy that's come to me, and I've used to explain my understanding of things multiple times, which is if we are right now, me, Josh, and everyone on the call are alive humans on Earth in third density. Could think of that as Mario on the TV screen of a video game. And this life, you're attempting to beat level 3. And oh no, you fell down the hole, you died. You restart at the beginning, restart for another attempt. You reincarnation, there's many incarnations level 3. But your higher, and I see your higher self as the dude sitting on the couch holding the video game controller in that aspect of that's who you truly are outside of this physical illusion. The higher aspect of you is not the Mario on the TV screen, but rather the person outside of the video game entirely, not within third density, who's on sitting on the couch, with your buddies playing this game of life. Now I know that's not like a one for one accurate, fully accurate analogy, but it had come up in the past, so I figured I would mention it here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think what they're saying in this case is the higher self is not controlling you in this incarnation. Everything that you're doing is free will, but for sure that video game metaphor I think goes a long ways. I think in many ways anyone could think of third density incarnation as it is kind of like being in a video game. And I know Carla, in many cases, often referred to our existence here as the game of life and referred to our third density illusion as a game board in many ways. I believe I had a couple. Yeah, Aram.
I just wanted to add, kind of adding to what Josh was saying, it just feels like they're repeating patterns throughout all the different densities, but the higher self at mid sixth density, they're also it or they or whatever it is also trying to evolve to seventh density. and and kind of like how we want to get to fourth by being 51% service to others. It almost feels like that's part of their requirements in order to graduate to seventh. They're tasked to guiding all of us in lower densities. So yeah, I don't know if that's a graduation requirement for them.
It sure would appear to be. I know in one of those previous passages we were reading, I think about fifth density, they were saying, yeah, up at those levels, fifth density and sixth density, part of the requirements of service to others is going back to assist entities at lower densities, kind of like what you're talking about, including as wanderers. Anybody else have anything wanted to add before we look at another passage, another aspect of sixth density?
One thing I wanted to point out, and goes back a bit to fifth density, is in fourth, fifth, and sixth density, we have social memory complexes, like you explained. And in fifth density, you're often, or can have instances where you're working alone, and not you're not necessarily working with the group, since but coming back into sixth density, your work of balancing the love and the wisdom is pretty much always done within the social memory complex as a whole, or yeah, just that difference of it. And especially in fifth density negative, they're certainly not working with others. They're
Yeah, that was my understanding of it as well. Yeah. Yeah, speaking of which, we said there were a couple of things worth noting that happen in sixth density. And one of those things is also where the service to self path reunites with the service to others path. As we mentioned, at third density, you can graduate and continue your growth on either path, the service to self or service to others path. But our friends in the Confederation have said that once you get to sixth density on the service to self path, one is forced to reunite with the service to others path. Let's take a look at a couple passages on that, or one passage. On July 1st, 1990, Kuo said, graduation to sixth density is very difficult for the negative polarity, for sixth density is the density of unity. When negative entities reach the point in sixth density at which they fully understand the lessons of sixth density, that is, that all things are one, they find that their negative path is at an end. They are at a standstill, unable to evolve one iota more. Using every bit of determination, will, and faith that they have, they cause themselves to switch polarity in order that they may go on evolving. This seems at the time to be a service to self-choice, for one thing that may be said of all densities is that there is an undeniable drive towards evolution. However, when the negative entity has switched polarity, it quickly discovers the sweetness of its choice. It must review a great deal of material it has missed, but it is the convert that is more fervent, if anything, than the one who has always been positive. It is the most positive of positive entities, the most loving, the most desirous of service, for it knows that it has finally discovered the truth that will continue its evolution. Whenever I read, I always think of Scrooge at the end of Christmas Story and how he really kind of went through that transformation from a very service to self attitude towards service to others, and how the joy that he felt, he was like that convert who is more fervent than those who've been on the positive path the whole time. Probably, I would assume, because they have seen how far in the dark one can go. They know the extremes of darkness and can appreciate more, perhaps, the extremes of light. Any thoughts on this passage, Grace?
Yeah, just what a beautiful thing what a beautiful experience to bring back to the creator. What richness is in that experience of going through the negative path up until a point where you literally cannot. And I really appreciate this negative aspect, the duality that there is, because it brings so much flavor.
Yeah, such a beautiful thing. And it goes back to what we said about the law of one does not blink at the light or the dark, and that according to the law of one, the service to self path is as valid as service to others. In both cases, the creator learns more about itself. And it's hard to take sometimes when you see what service to self entities can do. And yet, yeah, that is something that helps creator too. Josh, anything to add?
Not much, but I really like that reference to the Scrooge. I had not heard that before, but that seems like a great illustration. The only thing that came to mind is basically the same thing mentioned, is the rubber band effect. The further into the dark you go, once you hit that tipping point, the farther and faster into light you go. So just like they become the most positive of positive entities, is the use of that rubber band effect.
That's a great visual. Had not thought of it that way, but yes, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and this passage doesn't answer a question that I did have before, which is, I thought if a sixth density service to self entity switches polarity, I was thinking they would have to go back and start all over at third density and work their way back up the positive path. But they're saying, no, by the time you have reached sixth density in the service to self path, you have acquired so much power of creator that they can make the switch right over to sixth density positive without having to start over at the beginning. I guess that's encouraging, but you have to make it that far in sixth density on the service to self path, which I'm sure is not an easy thing to do. Aram, anything to add?
Yeah, I love the Christmas Carol analogy. I mean, the only other thing that I can kind of relate to is, you know, the former gang member who, you know, becomes like the pillar in their community and helps the mentors the young kids. And um, you know, I I the more I think about how much darkness there really is as you go up higher up in the densities, there's almost like a gratitude, like, you know, there's a gratitude that they're willing to take on all that, because I can only imagine how horrific that experience is up as you go higher and higher in the densities. And so, yeah, there's kind of this um, almost a gratefulness for their willingness to do that.
Indeed. Yeah, and speaking of going higher and higher, let's take a look at seventh density. On January 4th, 2020, not that long ago, Quo is recorded as saying, "The lessons of the seventh density are those which have been well learned in all previous densities, so that there is refinement within the seventh density that sees the love of the fourth density balanced with the wisdom of the fifth density, producing a power of the sixth density that allows the entity moving into the seventh density to begin to move back into complete unity with the one infinite creator through a process that may be seen to be endless in nature. The endless nature of the eternal present then becomes a kind of expansion of consciousness to include all of the one infinite creation for each seventh density entity. This gaining of spiritual mass then within each seventh density entity within its own social memory complex is that which infuses all of the creation of consciousness with the entirety or the unity of the one infinite creator, so that each individual entity and each social memory complex expands infinite outward as you would see it, so it becomes all that is. When the lessons of unity have been completed, then it is that entities move into the seventh density, that gateway density of foreverness, which allows the movement towards the complete reunification with the one creator, which is completed within eighth density, as you would call it, thus completing the great cycle of experience, with all experiences gained by each entity offered to the creator as means by which the creator has been able to know itself, that offered as that which shall become the seeds of the next great octave of experience. Yeah, I think there's been many times when our friends in the Confederation have referred to us all as sparks of the one infinite creator, as if we have been sent out to explore and experience everything that we can experience, so that eventually we can come back and be reunited with the creator, share what we have learned, and help the creator understand itself more, which apparently is the whole purpose of everything. And it's just such a beautiful image here that we see in seventh density as things come around full circle. Any thoughts, anything to add on this, Josh?
Not much. It's pretty far from things. Seventh density seems so far from third density to try and grasp or understand what it's really like there. You know, I do know somewhere they talk about the mind, body, spirit complex totality. Before it passes through the octave, the last thing it does is give it sixth density higher self, like resource. So like whatever the sixth density higher self is doing for us in third density, the seventh density mind, body, spirit complex totality does for its sixth density self. But that's really all I can.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah, that is just blows my mind so much. I can't even wrap my head around it that we have a higher self and our higher self has a higher self too, apparently. Anything to add, Aram?
Yeah, I kind of see like I try to see what's happening up there by looking at what's down here. And I know that like we've talked a lot about shadow work and like integrating the shadow self. And that's kind of how I think of, basically unity. It's like, we're this like 360-degree being, and there are aspects of ourselves that we've like disowned or exiled. And, when you can integrate those disowned parts of you, you become that whole, creator being again. And so the the negative path is kind of the parts that have exiled themselves, or, we can, when we love them and bring them back into the fold, like I said earlier, that's when we get to that seventh density of unity. And that process, it's like as above, so below, like what we do with our own individual selves is replicated higher and higher and higher, like to infinity.
Amazing to contemplate, for sure. Grace, anything to add?
Just very shortly, I think about the black hole. I think that's been mentioned a few times, and
That's
how the
coming up
black
in the
hole.
next passage.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, the
Yeah,
endless nature of that. So that's the thought I had.
nice. Thank you. I did have one last passage to look at relating indeed to black holes and seventh density. And I will say at this point, Aram, I know you said you had to leave at pretty close to the time it is now, and we started a little bit late, so I apologize for that. Feel free to take off whenever you need to, and we'll just go ahead and continue and wrap up with whoever's left here. But on October 15th, 2005, Quo said, "The sixth density has been often called the density of unity. It is a density which explores the balance between love and wisdom. The seventh density has been called the density of foreverness. In this density, the energies of spiritual gravity begin to take hold of you as a spark of the Creator. The Creator shot you forth into first density with the understanding and the knowledge that within an infinite reach of time-space and space-time, you would once again be drawn up into the Creator completely. The seventh density is the density where you prepare for and then go through the final stages of return to the one infinite Creator. At the end of this density, it is as if you have entered a black hole, and indeed, the physical black holes that your scientists have seen are physical aspects of this metaphysical process of spiritual gravity and the return of all that there is into the heart of the one infinite Creator. The end of this density system has been called by this instrument the octave, because she is a musician and sees that when the seven tones or colors of creation have been completed, there is a return to the original creation of the Father, as this instrument would put it. As the Creator's heart beats, shall we say, the entire process begins again. It is an infinite cycle. The Creator is endlessly curious." Really trippy to contemplate that what we see as black holes actually is, as they're suggesting, some sort of logos that has completed its octave and is collapsing into itself only to begin again in a new octave. Super trippy, super fascinating. Aram, I know you might need to go soon. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share on this passage before then?
Yeah, yeah, it boggles my mind to think about, the universe is never ending. There's no end, no beginning. It's just like yeah, I can't even wrap my head around that, but just the enormity, yeah, it leaves me in awe and without words.
For sure. Yeah. I'm only reminded that the one infinite Creator is often also referred to as the one original thought, meaning that that whole Big Bang that somebody was alluding to originally was basically an original thought of the Creator sending all of these sparks out to learn more about itself, only to come back eventually to start the whole thing again. Because apparently we're all brain cells in a cosmic mind, basically, and that infinite intelligence or intelligent infinity, as the one Creator has been referred to as also, is infinitely curious. It always wants to know more. So it's a never-ending cycle of wanting to know more. That's such a cool way of looking at the universe and looking at our planet, which otherwise seems like pretty horrific, otherwise, oftentimes. Grace, anything you wanted to add?
Just that I like thinking about the black hole. It brings up the idea of zero in math, and I feel like that's kind of akin to a black hole in some way. I also think about the idea of the shape of the circle and how perfect it is. These are just things that come up for me, but it's such a vast thing to think about. I love contemplating it.
You know, for some reason, I have made it this far in my life, and it never occurred to me that a zero is like a hole. That's like, yeah, a black hole. That's a really cool way to look at it. Josh, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess two things. First is I came across something that helped me better visualize and understand the progression of the densities and how they culminate in this black hole in where you can look at it as taking on a toroidal shape of a torus, almost like an apple. How the apple has a core in the center, that being the black hole or white hole at the eighth or first density. And then you have the funnel shape coming up out where the stem is, and it goes out and around. The universe is expanding and experiencing itself, and as it progresses through the seven densities, it comes around. And at one point, the reason this snapped into place for me, Ross said, the spiritual gravity increases marginally from first to sixth or seventh density. And then at seventh density, spiritual gravity increases significantly because that matches the concept of a black hole. You know, you may have seen an example with like a bowling ball on a trampoline and then a marble, goes around. So when then coming down the bottom of that funnel at the bottom of the torus, seventh density approaching eighth density, which is first density of the next octave in the core in the center of that torus, you could visually see why spiritual gravity increases significantly there compared to second, third, fourth, and fifth going around the curve of the torus. It's not as steep of an angle as that funnel going up. And the only other thing that came to mind is that in the rock contact, they mentioned the guardians, who have like 1 foot in first density, the next octave, and seventh density of our octave. They kind of are in the threshold of the next octave and our current octave, and the guardians oversee on a high level, various things in our experience, including harvest and so on.
Super fascinating. That's why I always enjoy having panelists on, because you guys always people always think of things that I'd never considered, never thought of before. And that torus is a great visual for sure. I can see that. We are kind of at the end of our discussion here. Is there anyone who wanted to add anything about seventh density before we start wrapping things up? So where do we go from here? After 2 hours of discussion on densities 1 through 7, the whole structure of the universe, what are some takeaway lessons perhaps to remember? One, you could think of densities as levels of consciousness, kind of a roadmap for spiritual evolution, and an understanding that nothing is random. Everything here is happening for the purpose of creator spiraling upwards increasingly to better understand itself. And yeah, you could think of evolution as an upward spiraling of light and love back to union with the creator. And if you were not aware of this, yes, it would appear that the meaning of life, the purpose of life in third density, is to choose between the service to others or service to self path and commit to that so that you can go on to fourth density, the density of unconditional love and compassion. That apparently is the direction to go in spiritual evolution. And then it just goes on forever and ever and never ends, indeed. Panelists, any last thoughts, takeaway lessons you want to add of your own, Aram?
Yeah, my takeaway is that I really need others to discuss these topics with, because by myself, I have a lot of confusion, and then sitting here talking with you guys and being part of these discussion groups really brings a lot more understanding to me. So thank you all.
Same for me. Thank you so much. Josh, anything to add?
No, I think it was great hearing all the discussion and all the readings you provided. Love is the answer.
Yeah, that could be the big takeaway lesson right there, I think. Well said. Grace, anything want to add?
Just like what Josh said, having that fourth ray, or excuse me, the fourth center, green ray activation, and having that as your processing center and doing everything in love and processing everything like through love. I think it's just a beautiful experience, and I've loved hearing what everyone had to say.
Me too. Thank you so much. You guys are the best panel we've had on so far. And I know I say that to every other panel, but with you guys, I really mean it. You guys are awesome. And that means it is time for a pop quiz. Pop quiz, of course, is something we like to do at the end of these sessions, just to kind of end on a fun note and add a little bit of pop culture knowledge and look for Law of One lessons in pop culture. So since today's episode was about densities, our pop quiz today is about second density entities, and specifically those of the canine persuasion. I'm going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about famous dogs in pop culture. See how many you can get correct. Those watching this on video, you can just say your answers out loud and we can hear you through the screen. Are you guys ready for your first question?
Ready?
Yep.
Of course. One of the most famous dogs known in pop culture, of course, is the one we call Snoopy. However, what you may not know was that was not his original name. What was Snoopy's original name? Was it A, Sniffy, B, Sammy, or C, Spike? Panelists, just go ahead and say your answers out loud.
Spike.
Sniffy.
Nice. Nice.
Sammy.
Nice. Ooh, covering all the bases. Well said, indeed. The correct answer is A, Sniffy. Well done, whoever said that here, and random person watching on video who said that. Apparently, Peanuts creator Charles Schulz was originally going to call that character Sniffy, but in his own words, he said, "I was walking around the Powers department store in Minneapolis, and there was a little magazine stand. I saw a comic with a dog named Sniffy and thought, oh no, there goes my dog's name. Then I remembered a long time ago when my mother said, if we ever have another dog, we should name it Snoopy." And that's what he went with. Spike was the name of Charles Schultz's actual dog. Charles Schultz apparently had a dog named Spike who had similar markings. And eventually, I believe there was a character who was Snoopy's brother in the comics named Spike, who came along later. Well done. Let's try another one. Another very, very famous dog from pop culture. Before appearing in The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland, Toto, also known as Terry, that was his actual name, did actually appear in a movie with whom? Was it A, Shirley Temple, B, Spencer Tracy, or C, Mickey Rooney?
A.
All old-timey movie stars. Josh says A?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Shirley Temple.
Nice. The correct answer is all of the above. You should know by now, that's always an option. All of the above, none of the above, any combination of the above is an option. Yeah, apparently this dog was really, really well trained, and I only learned this in the course of writing the pop quiz. The dog's name was Terry, and when it came to the attention of movie producers and directors, wow, they just came to realize this dog is really good in the movie. So Terry's first movie was Bright Eyes with Shirley Temple in 1934. And then Fury with Spencer Tracy in 1936, The Buccaneer for director Cecil B. DeMille in 1938, and Stablemates with Mickey Rooney in 1938 also. And after the success of The Wizard of Oz, the dog's name was officially changed to Toto, and she appeared in 5 more movies before retiring in 1944. Almost certainly graduated to third density, I would say. Are you ready for your last question? This one is a little bit more obscure and less well known, but there's a beautiful law of one connection we'll get to in a minute. What was the name of the dog mascot for the AFC Richmond soccer team in Ted Lasso? And if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, just gonna have to guess on this one. But what was the name of their mascot? Was it A, Earl, B, Arthur, or C, Wesley?
All of the above.
Well, you're at minimum a third correct. Yeah.
I'm going to say A.
Nice.
I want to say C. Wesley.
Nice. The correct answer is, in fact, A, Earl. Have you guys seen, did any of you watch Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful series that was on the Apple channel, and it's about a guy played by Jason Sudeikis, who was from Saturday Night Live. He was a college football coach who was hired to coach a professional soccer team in Britain, even though he knew nothing about the game. But the dog was a greyhound, so the dog's full name was Earl Greyhound. It came out during COVID, during the quarantining, and its unique blend of humor and heart helped a lot of people get through that really difficult time. And a beautiful example of that would be in this clip that I am about to show you. Earl, of course, is the team's mascot, and in the season 2 premiere, the team has been stuck in a tie streak, and they're really desperately trying to get their first win. So they get a penalty kick, and their star kicker, Danny Rojas, gets a penalty kick to score. But Earl, the greyhound, somehow gets loose from his handler in trying to chase a pigeon that flies in front of the goal. And it just happens to be timed so that Danny's kick hits Earl, the dog, and kills him right there. So the scene, the clip we're about to see is in a press conference afterwards where there's a question about that.
I was wondering if you had any comments on Earl, the dog Danny Rojas killed today.
Trent Krim, bringing that heat. Yeah. Well, when I was 3 years old, I got attacked by our neighbor's dog. I don't remember it happening, but my mother said it was pretty scary, you know. I do remember being afraid of dogs while growing up, though. Like if I was at a friend's house for a sleepover or something, they'd have to keep their family dog outside, otherwise I'd bawl my eyes out. Then in high school, our neighbor, Mr. Grady, well, his wife passed away. And he was real sad about that, as you can imagine. And he just kind of stopped taking care of their dog. Same one that bit me. His name was Hank. And so I started looking after him, you know, feeding him, taking him on walks, playing fetch, all that fun stuff. Eventually, Mr. Grady's son moved his dad into a nursing home, and he asked if I wanted to keep Hank, and I was like, yeah, heck yeah. And then a year or so after that, we had to put Hank to sleep. It's funny to think about the things in your life that can make you cry. Just knowing that they existed can then become the same thing that make you cry knowing that they're now gone. I think those things come into our lives to help us get from one place to a better one. And I hope we helped Earl do just that. We're gonna miss him around here a whole bunch. Yeah.
Free advertising for Apple TV. You're welcome very much. Beautiful clip, though, and such a beautiful example of the emotional bonds that can form between third density entities and second density entities, and how we can all help each other continue to grow and evolve. It's a really beautiful series. Rarely have I laughed so much and cried so much, often in the same episode, and times. Highly recommend it. Panelists, I really appreciate your being here. Thank you so much for sharing your love and wisdom with all of our viewers and so on. Grace, any last thoughts, any goodbyes you want to share to our viewers?
No. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for being here. Josh, any last goodbyes want to say to our viewers?
Keep on seeking love and light.
Aram?
Yeah, I just watching that clip, it makes me think like how much love we feel for our pets is how the creator feels about us, maybe.
So beautiful, indeed. Well, panelists, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To anyone who's still watching this on TV right now on video, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service. We're sending you our love light and receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator, Adonai. Namaste.